Hey there, Kit Kats. The question of how Rome roamed, okay, from the Iberian Peninsula to Arabia to the Netherlands is one with a lot of complicated answers from people a lot smarter than me, but you clicked on this video, so it's probably that they were really toxic and poor sports about card games. The amount of times the world said die to Rome, and on the brink of death, Rome turned around and said, no you, is frankly staggering. But what can be expected from the people that said they came from the Trojans, guys beaten up by some nerds in a piñata, but that they would come back 13 centuries later to stuff them in a locker and copy their homework? One of the earliest victims of the good old spicker, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that, was Carthage. Now, common knowledge says that when you punch somebody's face in, push them to the ground, spit and kick on them, they well and give up. And poor little Carthage, those absolute idiots, thought the same thing. In the 3rd century BC, Carthage was the unquestioned greatest naval power in the Mediterranean, and Rome was the unquestioned most boot-shaped power in the Mediterranean. And boot won't kick ball! Sicily might be known now as a place that's so desolate they can't give away free real estate, but back in the 3rd century it was almost not the unwanted stepchild of the Mediterranean world, at least for a few years. Well, Carthage was all up in that Sicily. Rome wanted a piece of that action, so they employed the brilliant tactical strategy of declaring war on Carthage, a naval power separated by a sea, and then realizing, Sir, we're going to war with Carthage. They have 350 boats. Fantastic! How many do we have? 0. Fantastic! So after the Romans realized a pasta-heavy diet doesn't make for the best swimmers, they started building a navy after they had already declared war. A big problem with not really knowing how to build boats too well, or to fight with boats, or to war with boats, is that you tend to lose a lot of naval engagements. But the Romans had a great idea, as usual. Get a big old plank of wood, sail their boat up close enough to the enemy that they can plop it down, run over, and whack those Carthaginians a good one straight across the face. They whacked them so hard that at the largest naval engagement of the war, the Battle of the Roman fleet actually won. Sailing home to Italy victorious, the Roman fleet was promptly struck by a storm, sinking nearly all of its ships and killing 100,000 of their men. Sir, you know how we built hundreds of ships to win the war? Yeah, I got really inspired by that Mr. Beast video. Well, they all sank. What's a few hundred more? After losing their entire navy, Rome built more than 200 more ships, sailed back to Sicily, held the opposing army at Spotha Point, and said, Sicily mine! And that marked the end of the First Punic War and the last time anyone cared about Sicily. Rarely are sequels better than the original, but wars, it's like always the case. You like the First World War? Well, wait until you hear about the Second. You like the First French Revolution? Well, wait until you hear about the... it's like the MCU. While the First War was largely the first iteration of the now widely loved game of bumper boats, the Second War between Rome and Carthage was a cage match between the legendary general, certified historic bad boy Hannibal on flippin' elephant back, and Rome's middle finger. You almost feel bad for the guy. So, Hannibal, absolute giga-chad that he is, took some elephants all the way from the north of Africa, around Hispania, Gaul, over the Alps, and into the land of the pasta people, Fazul, and proceeded to do that thing that cats do when you leave, like, anything on a ledge. Only he did that with, like, everything in Italy that wasn't the city of Rome itself. This carried on for 2 years until Rome decided, that's enough, send all the soldiers. Like, you want to send a whole legion? All the soldiers! And when met with the entire Roman army, Hannibal pulled a pro-gamer move and used his type advantage against Roman-type enemies to super effectively, completely annihilate the Roman army. GG. GG. When news reached Rome of the defeat, the Romans promptly regained the favor of the gods by taking 4 alive people, sticking them in the ground, covering them with the ground until they weren't then grabbed every male child, debtor, criminal, and slave, and boom bam, thank you ma'am, there you go, you got yourself 2 brand new legions. 2 wonderful new legions that, later that same year, suffered another massive defeat. Probably should have looked into what type of criminal Uncle Touchy was before you put him in the shield wall next to a preschooler. Open up a massive hole. In the shield wall. So, when Hannibal, having taken the Romans' lunch, pooped on it, given it back, stolen it back again, pooped on it a second time before force-feeding it back down Rome's throat, offered to let the Romans surrender and ransom back their survivors, you'd be forgiven for being surprised when the Romans said, GG, re? And proceeded to continue using Rocky's tactics of blocking every single punch Hannibal threw their way with their faces until Hannibal ran out of soldiers and the Romans marched into Carthage demanding they strip all of their overseas territories and some of their African territories as well. This was all the fun Rome wanted to have with them though, because about 50 years later they just marched straight back into Carthage and said, GG, no re.